Hi friends, hi, it is me Haley and I'm outside currently coming to you from wonderful. Okay, so today will be the first of several installments where I document or share my recently taken trip to Cuba, which I'll get out the way, I highly recommend everyone to do. So today's installment specifically will cover things to do and consider before you go to Cuba. In doing my research, there were just a lot of things that was hard for me to actually find out all in one place. So this right here should act as your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about visiting Cuba. So sit back, relax, enjoy the view. Let's go. Okay, so you want to go to Cuba and you're not really sure where to start, how to do it. I'm coming from an American perspective, so I'll put that out of the way, as there are a couple of guidelines we must follow as Americans in order to visit Cuba, because tourism, of course, is strictly prohibited. So a few things to note when you go to Cuba. Credit cards do not work. American credit cards do not work, so you will not be able to rely on credit cards when you go there. As I said, as Americans, there are certain guidelines we must follow. Tourism is not an option for us, so we must choose from a list, and I'll get to in a moment, of why we're actually going to Cuba. So we have to identify while we're going there. There's a plane going by. Hold on, let me wait for this damn plane. Oh, the joys of being outside. So the plane is gone. So as I was saying, you can't go there for tourism. You have to choose a specific reason as an American as to why you're going, and we'll go over that list in a moment. You cannot go to, or I should say, you can't stay at any government-owned hotel. So you are restricted to staying at private homes or casas. You also cannot go to any government-sponsored stores or eat at any of the government-ran restaurants. So those are some things to keep in mind. Not going to any of those places did not damper my trip in any way, shape, form, or fashion, so do not let that be a concern. Cell phone. So I went there with the expectation of my cell phone not working, and so I bought a SIM, which I'll talk about in a moment. However, when we got there, my friend who has AT&T, I do as well, was able to receive messages, but within a day she also received a text message advising her that she had already accrued $100 worth of charges just from receiving messages. So do with that what you will. I will give you instructions on how you can actually take a phone there and use a Cuban SIM, which gives you a Cuban phone number, gives you data, and you can communicate that way rather than racking up a lot of actual expenses if you were to take or try to use your actual American cell phone. Okay, so those are just some quick, just so you know before you go, things. Now let's go into the official tasks. These are steps you will have to take prior to visiting Cuba. The first thing is you have to identify why you are going. And I probably put a list over here. For me, I selected, and I think it's probably one of the more common ways for a regular visitor, would be support of the Cuban people. And so what that entailed is that you have to support the Cuban people. And as I said earlier, that would mean you're not staying at any government-ran hotel, you're not patronizing any government-ran restaurant or store. Every dollar that you spend will go directly to supporting an individual Cuban person or family and not the government. Okay, so now you've identified why you're going. The next step I took, and again, you may follow a different order, but these are all tasks that you will have to complete, is I found a place to stay. And I will say Airbnb was my one-stop shop for finding not only a place to stay, but also the activities that I decided to do. And terms of a place to stay, I'm probably cutting at this point to video of the place I stayed. I was looking for somewhere with great reviews, of course. I did 2 bedrooms. One of the most important things for me was Wi-Fi, because I knew that Wi-Fi was scarce, so I wanted to have one central location I could always go to should I need to communicate with my family, as well as the various tour guides for the activities I booked while there in my stay in Cuba. So my casa was in Plaza Vieja, which was a very common location that came in very handy, because when taking a cab, needing to come back home, it was very easy to tell them where I stayed, because they all knew Plaza Vieja is a very, oh, here comes another plane. The location I stayed was great because all the cab drivers, all I had to do was say Plaza Vieja and they knew exactly where I was located, and it was such a nice area. Dancing in the street, there were plenty of restaurants. Actually, our casa was an apartment and it was right across from a really nice restaurant, and I'll talk about all of that when I do my day-to-day things, but it had various restaurants and breakfast spots and different places, different stores. We did a lot of our souvenir shopping there, so it just turned out to be a really nice location. It was easy to find cabs there because there's just a lot of traffic. So kudos to me for finding that place. Our casa, like I said, was 2 bedrooms. One thing to keep in mind is that it is very common for there only to be AC in the bedrooms if there is AC. So if AC is important to you, just make sure when you're looking for a place to stay that AC is available, but it's very common that only the bedrooms will have the AC. I'm from Florida, so I am used to hot weather. It doesn't bother me at all. And Cuba to me was very comparable to the Florida weather. The exception is there's no escaping it. Like, a lot of places that we visited did not have AC. So you're just outside, or you'll go inside of a building or a restaurant or what have you, and there's no AC there. So that was probably the hardest part, is not having the opportunity to escape the heat until we'd come all the way back to our casa, go upstairs to our bedrooms where we would have the actual AC. But other than that, it wasn't a problem. You just stay hydrated. But if heat is a factor, I went in September. You probably want to go, I think it gets cool. I want to say one of our tour guides told us like in January or February it's cooler. So you may want to keep that in mind when planning your trip, because AC is an American luxury that a lot of places in Cuba just did not have, but it did not put a damper on our trip at all, at least not for me. And again, I'm from Florida, so the heat doesn't bother me. It was just adjusting to not being able to easily escape the heat by going into a store, because oftentimes that store would not have AC either, or it'll have like a little AC, and it's definitely not cooling the entire establishment. Again, that wasn't a big thing. Like I said, Wi-Fi was included in our casa, which was a godsend, because again, you're able to contact your family, your friends, just to keep them posted on your stay. I was communicating with a lot of the tour guides just to make confirming that everything was a go, what time was the pickup, and things of that nature. So definitely make sure that where you're staying has Wi-Fi. And read the comments about if it's reliable or not. Our Wi-Fi was pretty reliable. Oh, the other thing that we have some people walking around in the background. The other thing that I really enjoyed was every morning a cook would come in and make us breakfast, which I found to be very common when you're reading or looking for places to stay in. We stayed in Havana, Cuba. Stay in Havana is a lot of the Airbnbs. One of the things they would offer is breakfast is included with this. Breakfast is like a continental breakfast is really what they were offering. They offered tea or coffee coffee. I typically opted for tea. My friend opted for coffee, and they always brought some type of fresh squeezed juice, like papaya juice, which was really refreshing. So it was a really good start. She would come every morning and then ask us what time to bring it the next morning, and she would be prompt and on time, in and out before you know it, and then she would come and clean it up. So that was always nice, just to have something in our belly. But we also had a couple of wonderful breakfast shops right close to where we were staying as well, like it was in walking distance. It was in the same plaza. So either way, we had options for breakfast. But in considering a casa, that is always something to look forward to. And like I said, it was very commonly offered when I was looking for different places to stay. So that is the place. So you have a place. The next thing to book is your flight. I booked through American just from my location. That was the only airline that offered flights to Cuba. And so with American, that is where you're going to have to identify why you're going to Cuba. I think it may have even asked me where I was staying. Don't quote me on that. I know in something I filled out, maybe it was my visa, I had to fill out where in Cuba I was staying. So the airline, when you book your flight, mine was kind of pricey, but also I'm not in a huge major hub. But when you actually book your flight, that includes the required health insurance that you need in order to enter Cuba. You don't get any kind of documentation or anything special for it, but when you look at your actual ticket, I know for American Airlines, it lets you know that you were charged $25 for that required health insurance that is required for entering Cuba. So that was one less thing I had to worry about. The next thing you have to fill out is a visa. And so there's a quick little site that I'll point you to. I'll also put it in the comments or in the description. Is that another plane? Listen, okay, it's not too bad. Okay, we'll keep going. But filling out the visa was very easy. It's just an online form. I think it was a little over $100. It took maybe 3 to 4 days for me to receive it. As soon as I booked my flight, I booked my visa probably like a month and a half before I even went to Cuba. So I just put it all on my passport. So that was one less thing I had to actually request. After I booked my visa, the next thing I did was I registered with Smart Traveler. I recommend that with any international trip you're going to take. So did that. Next thing we did was order a SIM card. So if you have, I think it works best, it's highly recommended if you have an Android, even an older Android, just make sure it is unlocked. That was the thing I ran into. Was I took an Android to Cuba that I did not realize it wasn't unlocked, so it was inoperable at that point. But what you can do is you can order a SIM card. I want to say it was like $35. It gave you, I don't remember how many minutes and how much data, just enough so that if you are in a bind in the streets of Cuba, you need to make a connection to you need to call someone, or you need to look up something, you would easily be able to do it from that phone. And you can order it online, and it's ready for you when you get to the Cuban airport. Like literally as soon as you walk into the airport off of the shuttle that they bring you on before you go to immigrations, I think it's called Cuba Tour or Cuba Cell. It's literally right there. You give them your name. It says bring your name and passport. Your passport's already on you, but they just asked my name and gave me the SIM. And it's just like any other SIM, you pop it in. But again, make sure the phone you take is unlocked, because I get there, I put the SIM in, I enter the PIN, that's accepted, and then it says enter your network code, which I found meant that that actual phone had not been unlocked. And just because you pay it off apparently doesn't automatically unlock it. So that is definitely something to consider. But again, I would highly recommend finding an old Android phone, or if you already have an Android phone, even better, I'm an iPhone, is ordering that SIM, have it waiting for you at the airport so that you can immediately start communicating, whereas we had to wait till we got to our actual Airbnb before we could let all our friends know, hey, we're here. The next thing that you have to do is build your itinerary. Like I said, if you're choosing support of the Cuban people, one of the requirements is that you have a full itinerary showing that you supported the Cuban people. And that is why I chose Airbnb, because that's easily trackable. I can easily prove. I have all my tools. But again, I chose Airbnb to book all of our activities with the exception of a spa that I booked, and I found the spa based on one of my tour guides just giving us that recommendation. And so that's the only thing that I booked that wasn't through Airbnb. In talking to my hosts, a lot of them here comes the plane. One thing I would say is all of the tour guides were so helpful even before I came to Cuba. Often they would provide like step-by-step instructions, things to know, things to do before you come to Cuba, things to consider, and were very open to answer any questions I had as I prepared for my travel. Again, outside of whatever that tour covered, they were just happy to assist us in getting there. So I really appreciate that, and that definitely helped with relieving a lot of the anxiety that I have, because Cuba was such an unknown to me because I don't know a lot of people that have visited, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. And so just being able to talk to someone there and just ask simple questions, because they've had plenty of Americans, plenty of tourists, so they kind of knew exactly what to consider, what to bring, what not to bring. And so I was able to talk directly to them and ask those questions. A lot of them, actually all of them, have WhatsApp, which is one of the apps I highly recommend you downloading. So packing. Again, I went in September, so it's very hot. I would highly recommend dressing comfortable. Typically, we wore shorts or like a sundress and flat shoes or tennis shoes, comfortable shoes, because it's like cobblestone. So wearing heels, even though I did wear heels, I would actually wear flats until I got to our destination, and then I would switch to heels just to be cute for the pictures. But like just walking around in heels, that would not make any sense, and you will be liable to hurt yourself because it's just the cobblestone just will not let you be great in heels. So just dress comfortably. In terms of a packing list, I'm going to display my packing list. Keep in mind, I travel a lot, so there's some things like simple toiletries and things like that you're not going to see on the list, sunscreen and stuff like that, simply because I always have that in my little toiletry bag. But just some things to think about when going to Cuba is there's no convenience store that you can go to. So pack like you're going camping, but the food is there. I don't think this plane is that bad. Let me let it go because I'm kind of in my groove or whatever. Okay, plane goes. So like I pack things like a first aid kit, because you never know. I mean, you can't just walk. Like I said, there's no convenience store, so if I had a cut, there's not somewhere I can just easily walk and get a Band-Aid, right? You can't go to a grocery store without this special credit card that I didn't really get into if it was specifically for Cubans, or if foreign visitors could actually obtain it to go grocery shopping. I just went on the expectation that I wouldn't be able to go to a grocery store, that I would be eating out every day. Now, I'm sure that if I would have asked my host, maybe they would have been able to bring some things for me, but I didn't plan on cooking on this trip. I was on vacation, and so I was going to eat out. But like, you'll see just from my list, just things just to consider, things like I said that I packed. And then of course, if there's anything on my list, if there's something that is not on my list, I probably brought it. I just always have it, so it's just a no-brainer. This is my list. I had to keep a checklist for me. One of the things when I was walking, I always had this little book bag here, and in my little book bag, I would have like wet wipes and toilet paper, because there were a few places that we visited that just did not have toilet paper. So we had our own, no biggie. Or one thing that I found very interesting is that some of the places we went didn't have toilet seats. Didn't bother me. Actually, I thought it was pretty genius because I'm a squatter. I'm not sitting down on a public toilet seat. So I think maybe that's the custom there. I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. But yeah, typically, most of the places we went to did have toilet paper, but there were a few that didn't. And I had read to bring it, so I brought it with me, as well as my wet wipes, sanitizer. Also, one of the things that I wasn't sure of, or just based on the videos I was watching, led me to believe fresh water is scarce, or I should say bottled water was scarce. And so just to prepare for that, I went and purchased this like survival water bottle with the filter in it, so if push came to shove and I had to drink just the tap water, it would be filtered because I didn't want to get sick. I took Pepto-Bismol and all of that stuff too, but it was very easy for us to get bottled water. When we got to our casa, and I think I showed in the video, they had, I want to say 4 bottles of water there for us to purchase. And then right below, when we went downstairs, right next door was a little, I guess it was the equivalent of a little bodega. They had food there, and they sold water, beer, some snacks as well. And so we were always going there to grab bottles of water. And so typically, and then the restaurants we went to, they sold the big bottles of water as well. So there was never a moment where we were unable to access water, but not knowing, being prepared for anything, because being hydrated was very important because it was hot. I took a little filter here, and I had this in my book bag the whole time, which came in handy when you got the big bottle. Anything that was left, I usually just poured it in here, so I wouldn't have to carry that big bottle around. So that's how I usually traveled wherever I was going. Had a little book bag that had everything I needed in it. Usually I packed some little breakfast bars because we would leave our casa and be out all day, so I definitely carried a little book bag around. So that's the packing list. Next was the money. So as I said before, American credit cards do not work in Cuba, so the cash you take is the cash. You can't take a credit card, so you have to take all the money that you plan to spend there. We were there for 4 days and 3 nights. I took $1,200. I took $200 in euros, and that was simply because one of the Airbnbs specifically requested that we bring additional euros to pay for the rest of that particular trip or activity. And then also I had read that if for whatever reason I needed to purchase something in the airport in Cuba, I could not use US dollars. So I purchased 200 euros. I did it from, well, my bank is Wells Fargo, and so I was able to order them online at Wells Fargo, and they mailed them to me. Yeah, they mailed money to me and delivered it to me via FedEx overnight. My friend who went, she just went and purchased the euros from the airport. So you do it either way. I'm a planner. I want to make sure I have everything before I leave. I left nothing to chance. But so I went through Wells Fargo. They overnighted it to me. My friend went to the actual airport. You can do it there. And I believe you can also exchange your money in Cuba. I just don't know I don't know how it works with the American dollar getting euros, so don't quote me on that in Cuba, how that's going to work. But I did see exchange places so that you could get additional money or exchange your currency. In terms of money and how much to spend, as I go through my day-to-day itinerary or those videos, I try to highlight how much things cost. I would say the most expensive thing for us was transportation, the cab fare, getting back and forth to places. I paid probably $60 to $120 a day getting around. That is what I paid. That is what we paid. And I'm sure we may have paid a little bit more because we were foreigners, and that is okay. Again, I took $1,200 there with the expectation of bringing nothing back. I went there to support the Cuban people. So if there's a little price gouging because I'm a foreigner, did not take away from my experience, did not cost me anything more than I was willing to pay. I made sure that we tipped everyone heavily. Everyone was well compensated for their time. And I mean, for example, our tour guide for our Afro-Cuban tour was an engineer. He made $20 a month. So $20 a month. So we, of course, tipped him greatly after the tour. So again, our biggest expense definitely was transportation. We spent anywhere from $60 to $120 a day just on transportation. But other than that, everything else wasn't that expensive. I came back, I took $1,200, came back with probably over $300. So that just tells you and we did everything we wanted to do. Well, I can't say everything we wanted to do because we didn't have a lot of time, but everything we set out to do, we were able to do. We weren't running out of money. So just keep that in mind. So that may be a little, I don't know what kind of traveler you are, but I will say we didn't eat out more than maybe twice a day, simply because usually one of the activities we would book through Airbnb included a meal at some point. We just lucked up that way, but whenever we had a meal, it wasn't that expensive. So again, biggest expense was the travel or transportation to and from the various places we went via cab. Food and drinks, not that expensive at all. Souvenirs, not that expensive at all. But so I took $1,200, and as I go through the day-to-day series highlighting my day, I'll again highlight how much things cost, and hopefully that will help you determine how much you should take. Oh, the other thing with money, so the exchange rate. So when you get there, I would recommend, well, before you get there, I would recommend finding a source to exchange your money. For me, I had two sources. The first source was one of my tour guides was going to exchange I think the exchange rate he offered 1 to 120, meaning for every $1 we would get 120 Cuban pesos. So that was great. So I had him lined up, and then also our host at the Airbnb we were staying, they also offered exchange money for us. That exchange rate was, I want to say 110 to 1. So sorry, 1 to 110. So for every $1, for every $1 US, they would give us 110 pesos. So we had two sources lined up, so I didn't have to worry about going to the government ran exchange, because I heard they really tax you. I think it's like 1 to 24, so you you can see the difference there. When we get there, I mean, everyone's so friendly. We immediately are befriended by this guy named Raul, who really turned out to be a great help to us throughout our trip, and he offered us 1 to 130. So for every 1 peso was 130 peso. Or for every dollar, we would get 130 pesos. So we ended up exchanging with him. I only exchanged $100, which turned out to be, I think, like 12 or 13,000 pesos. So even only exchanging $100 for like 13,000 pesos, I was trying to pay everything I could in pesos, and even with that, I think I had a couple of pesos left. So again, my money went far. I definitely did not feel like this was a very expensive trip once I got there. Now my flight was pretty expensive, and like I said, our biggest expense was the cab ride, but other than that, I found it to be a pretty inexpensive trip. So let's see, we've talked about things to know. No shoes, no shirt, no service. I'm just kidding. Things to remember: you can't take your American credit cards there. They're not going to work. You cannot go there as a tourist. So you cannot come to Cuba and just spend all day walking the streets and just having a jolly old, well, you can have a jolly old time, but you can't just spend all day doing nothing in Cuba, just exploring. That's not going to work for you. Cell phones may or may not work, but I gave you an option for that with the actual SIM card. Make sure that you have a full itinerary. Again, I booked through Airbnb. Make sure that you have a way to exchange your money. With the money, I was able to spend dollars everywhere with the exception of, we went to a beach that did not accept US dollars. We had to use euros there. And we did end up having a long layover in the actual airport, and I had to use euros to buy bottles of water. Other than that, cash was king. I could take cash everywhere and use it, and so that was not a problem. Once I was out of the airport, I paid my cabs in cash. We went to restaurants in cash. Again, I was kind of going back and forth between paying in pesos and paying in cash. Typically, I would ask my tour guide if they prefer to be tipped in cash or pesos, because they just take it and exchange it. So usually they didn't care. It's whichever you preferred. So just make sure you have a way to exchange your money. again, scammers are there. I will talk about in one of my videos how we were scammed, but just be cautious. I heard a lot about people scamming people out of the money exchange. I don't know exactly how they did it, but we did not have that issue. We were definitely fortunate in that. Booking your flight, get your visa. Oh, the other thing you have to do, and I somehow missed it, you have to fill out this Cuban form, visitor form. I'm gonna post a link in the actual description. When I got to the airport in America, my first leg, first of all, you can't check in via app to fly to Cuba. So I had to go up to the front desk, and they were asking they asked about my actual vaccination record. So going into Cuba, and again, this is shot September 2020, there's no vaccination requirements. You don't have to show proof of vaccination. You don't have to take a COVID test or anything like that. But flying through American, they asked me I had to prove to them that I had been vaccinated. That was weird, and I didn't have my vaccination card. But I was able to show them, I had actually had a picture of it, so I was able to show that, and I was accepted. But this form I forgot to fill out, they gave me a little pushback saying that they could not check me into my flight until I filled it out. But fortunately, I was aware that I just needed that to get to Cuba. It didn't matter if I had filled it out now or prior to getting to Cuba. That was not something to prohibit me from being checked into that flight. And after going back and forth with the airline associate, she was able to check me in or whatever, and I filled it out once I got to my connecting flight in Miami. However, once I got into Cuba, they have the form that you can fill out, like manually fill out. And so, but I will say that it does save time when you fill it out online. And again, it doesn't take very long. It's just kind of asking for some information, your passport information. I believe it may have asked me where I was staying. I believe it asked me where I was staying in Cuba, and that kind of information. But that was the one form I did not have filled out prior to getting to the airport. Gave me a little bit of panic because I was like, oh my gosh, am I not going to be able to get to Cuba? But again, they should not stop you from being able to check in because you don't have that form filled out. What I did is, like, I'll fill it out before I get to Cuba. And I did. But when I got to Cuba, they have that form for you to actually manually fill out as well. But like I said, it does help the process when you can just scan it and they see everything filled out, and then you kind of go through to the next step, which is going through immigrations, having your visa checked, getting your passport checked out and everything like that. So I think I've covered everything. In the next couple weeks, I'll cover my day-to-day, each day that I was there, the activities, the fun things we did, all the visuals, because Cuba is absolutely beautiful. Oh my gosh, beautiful. The people are beautiful. The food was amazing. That's another thing. When I was doing research, people said the food was I did not have that experience at all. The food was delicious to me. So as we go through, plane, of course, as we're wrapping things up, a plane comes. Okay, so like I said, in the next coming weeks, I will post videos of my trip in the various days and what I did. And I hope this initial video helped you in whether you're still on the fence about going to Cuba, or if you needed some help or guidance on how to prepare for your trip to Cuba. I hope this helped in that way. If you have any questions or comments, put them down in the comment section. You've made it this far, friends, so come on, let's like. If you want to continue to hear about all my adventures, Cuba was the first, but definitely will not be the last. Make sure you subscribe. So yes, like, subscribe, comment. If you like the video, great. If you have comments, have questions, great. Put some comments down. So again, thanks for joining me. See you next time. Bye.